Hello and welcome to A Wheel Thing TV. I'm Dave Knoll. We're checking out the active Hyundai. Hello and welcome to A Wheel Thing TV. I'm Dave Knoll. In this week's episode, we're checking out the Hyundai Sonata, the active level. This is the entry-level car to the new 2016 Sonata range. It's the i40, but not as you know it. You can see that it's pretty much the same shape as the outgoing i40, but there has been a little bit of a sheet metal change at the front, especially with that almost Genesis style looking grille to it. A slight rearrangement of the headlights on there, but it still has the same profile, the same chrome strip just along there on the front fenders and flowing down into the rear. A little bit of a change for the tail lights, but effectively it's an i40, just a little bit of a reskin. In active trim it comes with, well, a fairly uninspiring looking interior, to be perfectly blunt. A tiny little 4.3 or 5-inch screen, something along those lines. The upper two models get a 8-inch display screen, but it's comfortable enough. It just doesn't inspire. It's not exciting. It sort of harks back to the old days of what Hyundai was all about. You know, functional, but not really terribly wanting to get people into a seat, I guess. The seats themselves, however, are very comfortable. You can see there's enough bolstering on there, cloth in this particular car. And in the rear, you do get enough of a rear seat passenger legroom situation for just about everybody. And of course, you've got some nice looking headrests there for passengers that need that kind of support. And the main two seats are nicely scalloped as well. So all in all, comfort-wise, it certainly suits. Just the look of it as well, just a little bit bland. Rubber on the active Sonata is 215/55/17s from Nexen. The tyres themselves have great grip. There's a very compliant, very plush, very luxury style ride in this particular model. And you feel it as you go over bumps. There's no crash, there's no bang, there's no real sort of juddering from the suspension or anything along those lines. It does feel very, very luxury oriented. You almost kind of feel too sometimes that it's going to have a lot of body roll, but it doesn't. It's quite a well composed chassis. It certainly hangs on, minimal understeer, and doesn't do too bad a job at all, especially over those bloody speed bumps that seem to infest Sydney and of course around the world. This is more of an Australian tuned suspension, and it certainly shows in the way that the engineers have worked with Hyundai to put this specification together for our market. Nothing special about the power plant's a little 2-litre, and it does a pretty reasonable sort of job at hauling the car along. It's 138 kilowatts, 241 newton meters, and it does a pretty reasonable job overall. It's not inspiring, but it gets the car along through its 6-speed automatic gearbox reasonably quickly enough not have to worry about it. At higher speeds though, it really does need to get the revs up if you're thinking about a serious overtaking manoeuvre. There's a multi-function display screen which is operated by a couple of buttons on the steering wheel, and as you can see we've got our distance covered and speed, our distance to empty and our fuel used, and as you can see 7.1 litres per 100, just under 240 k's to go, and we've covered 633 k's and mostly urban driving. That's not bad fuel economy, and of course your different folders to flick through as well for your settings on the car. It's a key start in this particular model. And as you can see on the dash, you know, it's fairly bland, quite frankly. It's ergonomic enough. It's certainly no problems in regards to the way that it looks. We've got lovely little blue lights here on the dash and on the steering wheel as well. They'll light up as a nice blue, but there's just nothing really visually gripping about the dash itself. Very, very simple setup in the base model here, as you can see, just a few buttons there to play with. What is interesting though, it does come with a drive mode, which gives you sport and eco as it displays up here on the dash, and of course back to normal mode. Changes the mapping of the gearbox a little bit, so you feel like you're holding the gears a little bit longer. Of course it does come with a manual shift option, but in all honesty leave it in normal mode and you'll be pretty much done with the driving style of the car as it stands. On the road, the Sonata Active does tend to move around a little bit, but it's more to do with the relatively high sidewall profile that the car has. It's 215/55, remember, so in real terms it's a little bit more narrower than you'd expect to see on a 17-inch rim nowadays. So therefore the high sidewall tends to just let the car sort of walk around a little bit, especially on more coarser chip tarmac. And it does have a really good suspension setup. It's a very Australianised setup for our roads. There's just enough sort of initial give before it hardens up very quickly to give you a very controlled ride. There's no sense of roll or anything along those lines. The only other thing that is a little bit of a disappointment in the car in one respect is the brake pedal. It's a little bit soft at the top. You feel like you do have to press down just that little bit further in order for the brakes to bite and give you a sense of the car's actually going to pull up. More than once I have to say that I felt that the car was just not pulling up hard enough and required a harder shove on the brakes. Just needs a little bit more pressure, a little bit more feedback through the pedal for that feeling of confidence to come through. Hyundai haven't done a great job, but they haven't done a bad job rebadging the i40 to the Sonata. It looks pretty much the same as the outgoing car. As I said, there's a bit of a sheet metal change at the front and just a little bit of a tickle up at the rear. It's got a very unusual roof line. It's almost a coupe style. Ride and handling is fine. The engine does the job. It's not lethargic, but it's not an absolute powerhouse either. It's kind of just the automotive equivalent of just right. For A Wheel Thing TV, I'm Dave Canole.